everybody. You're listening to and possibly watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in, or as we said, possibly stream in. And 2/3 of us just returned from Baltimore Comic Con. And we'll be talking about that. And we have a plethora of new books to talk about, some that we obtained at the con. Unfortunately, our brother Caleb didn't join us in Baltimore this year. We're hoping next year that he will be able to. And
I was hoping for this, but then I was like that because I wasn't there.
Yeah. It's a shame Steve wasn't prepared, but when we were talking on one of our threads, and Caleb sent us a picture of a kid on a seesaw by himself. It was heartbreaking, but I also laughed my ass off.
Good. That was what I was shooting for. That was what I was shooting for.
Like, oh, we did miss you there. I think it would have been great if you had been able to come, and also we got to hang out with our friend Brian, which was a lot of good times,
and many of the other people within our orbit. If people are familiar with the olden days of the Thundercast, Rob Stager was there, and it was a bunch of our friends were there, and it was really good seeing some people.
You know, honestly, it's funny. That is what, we all talk about FOMO and cons. That is what I miss out on. That is where I wish I was there. I remember, 10 years ago, right, when I first started, kind of being able to travel and go to Comic Cons, and I would see all of our friends post pictures and all of the cool cosplay, right, all of the cool art, all the books that they picked out, and I just felt like I was missing so much. Now it's the dinners, and it's the friends that you see, and just the people that are there, and the creators, and people are like meeting them and hanging out and stuff. That's what I miss by not being. I could meet you guys at a con, never step foot on the con floor, and just be around all the people that we know, and have just complete satisfaction. And that's what I missed.
Yeah. Turns out that comic conventions were just the friends you met along the way.
It was, right,
the whole time. But no, it really was, and it really is. I think part of what makes comic conventions special, and certain conventions in particular, Heroes Con, I'm going to say, is one of them. Baltimore is definitely another one. That's a little bit different from like the giant, New York Comic Cons, even C2E2, San Diego, of course. Is that people go there to see the stars? They go there to see like the big publishers and movie studios and TV studios nowadays as well, to just kind of like see, oh my God, I want to see what all crazy stuff they're going to be showing this time around. Like what experiences am I going to be able to take part in? But a show like this, you go there for the people. You go there to get up close and personal with different creators, to attend panels and be really get to hear all the great stories and gossip and and histories of people working in the industry in a way that's a little bit more intimate than like a Hall H situation. And I think a lot of that is important, and also the people that you get to attend with, you have more of a chance to spend time with them instead of being sort of like smooshed by the crowd, moving inexorably forward to whatever the next big reveal thing is. I do have to say that this con had some great vendors. I spent a lot more time with vendors than I usually do.
I can vouch. I saw him.
Yeah. I mean, like, usually I'm not like, oh, where can I go buy some stuff? Like, I'm more of a, like, let me wander the aisles and see what there is to see. And, I think I bought floppies for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah.
Now,
and Steve was also very patient because he knows I make a beeline to one particular vendor right off the bat. It's always
Victory Comics.
Yeah.
Victory
and
Comics.
And that was enjoyable to get that out of the way, because that was one vendor that I wanted to do a clearing of everything they had and then not revisit, because when you get in there, first dibs on decent stuff. Yeah, so
Yeah, and that was another benefit too. You know, with the press pass, you can get in there 30 minutes early and beat the crowds. So that was definitely a help.
Yeah. And also because of some of my ambulatory issues, I have to be very panel heavy at points.
Yeah.
And this particular show, there were various points where the panel that we attended was one of 3 we would have been happy to attend. It was a very well programmed show.
Oh yeah,
very well programmed.
There was a lot that was kind of like, you know, unfortunately scheduled at the same time. You know, there was a choice. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, one of the 3, like you said, that's going to be programmed. We're going to go and see, and we're going to love. And you know, we saw some really good ones. I know. I actually attended the Bad Idea panel, where they were revealing what's coming up. I know Bill's not a big fan, but I think
like to say I'm not a big fan, that's a lie in and of itself. Like I hate them. I hate that company. I hate their structure, and I don't even think their product's that great. I said it.
Oh,
go away.
Starting the beef big time.
It's no big.
I'm apathetic.
I still would have rather gone to the Bad Idea panel than bought something from the Comics Gate guys that had a booth there. But
yeah, and they did have
that one I'll give Bad Idea.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Bad Idea is that they addressed a lot of the big criticism.
But did they address it, or did they address it because retailers brought it up?
They addressed it at the beginning, actually, and then a retailer did bring it up because he was, you know, he had been waiting the entire panel to mention how pissed off he was and how much he was annoyed by Bad Idea. And they basically their strategy prior to this was just kind of like partnering with just a few stores and releasing stuff, not going back, you know, back issue sales, resales, anything of that nature. No reprints, no variants, blah 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 blah. They had a digital presence as well, or a lack of digital presence as well. There was a bunch of things they had when they first started, and then of course they had some like shit stirring, you know, activities. But
my thing about Bad Idea is I've heard them on several podcasts, and I've seen them at least 1 or 2 cons, and they're addressing the issues are always the same canned response, and it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It is. Well, I'm apathetic because I don't read their stuff. Like, I can't hate them because I've never touched a single one of their books. Like, you made it kind of hard for me to buy it, so you don't want me to buy it, so I'm not going to. I'm not jumping through hoops. I don't go to the Mercedes-Benz store so I can look at cars I can't get, right? Like, I'm just not going to. And if you don't make it convenient, I'm now at the point in my life where I'm going to not buy things that aren't convenient, that, you know, you're not that special. And quite frankly, the work that you did at Valiant was better. So
yeah. I had some goodwill that was kind of like leaked out from Valiant after they, after the change there, that allowed me to give them a shot. But also I did have some stores where I could go and purchase some of their books. And there were some great books. The lot
I don't have any problem
fantastic.
getting the books by me. I don't have any problem.
Exactly. But in North Carolina, I think there were maybe 5 stores.
Yeah.
So I just happened to be very close to a couple of them. So
I think there's only 1 store in Arkansas. I think.
Yeah. So, you know, that was something that they basically said they're not doing that anymore. So their new strategy is they are partnering with a distribution company. So it's either going to be Diamond, Lunar, or Penguin. And it's going to be, or was it Random House, Penguin, whatever Marvel's is now. But they're going to be partnering with one of them, and that's what they're going to be distributing. So you can actually order your stuff through the catalog. Any store could put them on their, can order them. Not a big issue. You can order them online. They're not doing digital, but they are going to be doing variants again. They take off the restrictions of you can't resell, you can't have back issues, that kind of BS that was
so their strategy worked. Their strategy worked so well, they worked their way up to the direct market. Okay, cool.
Exactly. Yeah. That is exactly it. So that, you know, what they were trying to do as a disruptor, just like every other disruptor that exists through time, after a couple of years, they're like, you know what, we got our foot in the door, and now we're going to be kind of like everybody else. But they do have some good ideas. They do have some great books. They've got some good creators on it. I'm looking forward to a lot of what they're dropping in March. So I will be purchasing that, and it'll be a lot easier for me to purchase it. I can just get it at 8 Pennyworths, or order it through DCBS going forward. So that's a big change that I think is going to help them sell a lot more books, especially for some of the books that they have coming out that are really good and should be in front of more people than having to see if you're within 100 miles of one of their 200 stores that they had partnered with over the past 4 years, which it's a big world. So
I still think they have a promising career behind them.
No.
Look, I'm not going to wish bad things on anybody. Like,
I don't wish bad. I mean, I hope all comic publishers work.
Yeah, like I want them to do great anything else. But my whole thing was, every time I heard them talk about their work, and look, at some level, there's a difference between gravitas and a plan and having believing in yourself. But there's also a line where you cross where you're just pretentious, and they crossed that line from jump. Like, and again, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, even though I couldn't get my hands on a lot of stuff. Like I said, listen to them on podcasts, was trying to see, because, look, at the end of the day, I do think the direct market has a lot of flaws and a lot of faults. And I do fault it for the status in a way, like not completely, but in a big way. I fault the direct market for the status of comic sales and stuff, at least in the American market. It's a big problem. It needs to change. There needs to be a lot of work. The comics market needs to grow. But they weren't doing that, right? It was just all pretension. They were never actually disruptors. And they came out shortly after, what was the company? TKO came out, that was also like, hey, we're doing something different, right? Mm-hmm. At least TKO did it with a little bit of just understanding. Like, we're making, we're like a boutique shop. We're making little stuff. Mm-hmm. We're going to see if we can sell this way. But we're not going to be pretentious about it. Pretend like it's going to have this huge impact on things. We're going to let Garth Ennis make Sarah with Steve Epting, and it's going to be wonderful. We'll give you a slipcase. And you can order it.
Yeah. I think there's it's that the idea that we're going to be a blockbuster boutique, and that doesn't work that way.
Not when you don't have a sense of self-awareness and humor to back it up. I mean, for God's sake, I still love Kiss. That's that in operation in a much better framework. And just, especially seeing some of the gimmicks at New York Comic Con over the last few years, it's just like so bereft of cleverness, and just everything about them rubs me the wrong way. And we've dedicated way too much time to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
We're done. Steve, we're done. Go on.
We'll get to the other than that, we did have another comic publisher that was doing sort of a, hey, what's coming up kind of semi-launch. And that was Mad Cave, actually talking about their horror line. And that they've been putting a lot more, I guess, work and promotion into their horror books, especially in the coming years. So they had, a couple creators that were on the panel to talk about a few of their creations. One of them, Bill, is going to be talking about as one of his books. The other one was, was also a pretty, intriguing title that was released in trade. And of course, they have several other titles that are coming up as well that they are looking to promote. So they're looking to grow that horror line within Mad Cave, and it seems to be kind of one of the things that's brought success to a couple other publishers. Dark Horse, Vault Comics, have had some really great successes with their horror comics over the past couple of years. Some really great, some really great books have come out of those initiatives. Well,
you should bring up what one of the creators said,
which was
about you could throw a dart and hit a great horror book at almost any comic store.
I almost thought that the Vault rep was going to have a little bit of a come on or attack, because of course they're promote Mad Cave books, but he was right. He was in saying that right now you go into any comic shop, you're going to have a selection of great horror titles.
I think that's true.
To choose from, and you've got some stuff that other mainstream writers have been putting out, that is more horror. Like Scott Snyder has been doing horror for the past 6-7 years, off and on. Anything by James Tynion, is great. But then also you've got,
well, even at the
other
big
new
two,
names.
right? Even at the big two,
Yeah.
the Hulk is a great horror book right now. There's several. DC has. I mean, DC's. I don't know if everybody likes it or not, but DC's, what is it? DC versus Vampires or whatever. I've heard good things about that. Over at Image, you've got. I mean, Philadelphia is one of my favorite books in Image right now.
Image has been really pushing some really great
So there's a lot. I mean, he's not wrong, and even with your indie.
And I also like how varied it is in formats, because if you just want a graphic novel quick read, there are plenty of books available like that. And if it's something ongoing, like Crossed or The Walking Dead, that you want an extended storyline, you have that available to you as well. So there's a big variety in terms of how the horror books are formatted, and that's great.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what else is coming up, and of course we are, as you can see, my little sub thing. Is it spooky season yet? It is almost exactly spooky season, but it's also spooky season all year long if you're a horror comics fan, because there's always something good to pick up. Which is great. But other panels that we hit up, we saw the Walt Simonson panel. That was a lot of fun. Hearing some of his stories. I think we only got.
You would have liked it. You would have liked it, Caleb, because he got so far in the weeds. He basically only talked about 3 books. He talked about Manhunter. He talked about
Alien, the Alien adaptation,
and he talked about I think, just to bring stuff current, the Ragnarok series.
And that was a lot of fun. We saw the comic couples, sort of like there's a podcast out there, and I wish I had it off the top of my head, but.
It's not connected. It's not connected.
It's not connected to but it was basically like seeing a live version of that, because it had several comic couples, including the Simonsons, Palmiotti and Connor. Let's see, who else was in there? There was
Billy Tucci and his wife, and the wife seems like a hoot.
Yep.
She
was running late because she was doing the taxes. It was great.
She thought the panel
and that was
the next day.
But it was just cute. It was cute, listening to their stories about how they met, how their work process works, and you have some that are a little bit more forgiving than others of their spouses. But the biggest and best piece of advice: have 2 bathrooms.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. I would not. That was a prerequisite for any house that we bought here in Winston. Is like it had to have at least 2 bathrooms.
So as far as modern comic books, as far as couples go, is Fraction and DeConnick, or they're the only like current mainstream couple I can think of. Are there any more?
Well, I mean, Jimmy Palmiotti and
Jimmy. No, but we're talking like who was Azzarello with? I think they split.
Ooh, I don't know.
Yeah, I thought, or Vaughn. I'm not thinking, but you also have a lot of people who are, in terms of comic book couples, where the spouse that's a non-creator is intensely involved in their business end. Immediately, Bendis and Grant Morrison come to mind.
Yeah,
their wives are effectively run the majority, if not all, of their business, and the Finches. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, the Finches. Better or worse, right?
I'll keep my laughter to myself on that one.
But I mean, there was. Let's see, we had a couple other panels there. DC in the '80s was pretty fascinating.
That was fun.
Good bunch of stories from that team, especially how monumental a change with the business that Crisis ended up being for DC.
Yeah.
In that, how things were done before Crisis and after Crisis were just night and day.
Yeah.
They changed their business model, their process model for, for art and for creative and editorial, like all of that was just like a stark break, to before Crisis and after Crisis, and that kind of just
I mean, I thought that was best exemplified in Carl Kiesel's story about how the revised Hawk and Dove came about, and how easily that pitch was accepted, and how things moved. And there was also some discussion about Doom Patrol, and how changes would necessitate it, and just really interesting conversation topics in regards to.
I love that. I love that the DC in the 80s, like that was what was brought up, because when you said DC in the 80s, my first my thought was, okay, yeah, we're gonna talk about Dark Knight, and
Dark Knight Crisis, Watchmen.
Dark Knight, and that's all people talk about. But the fact that we're talking about, number one, Crisis, which I do think you have to talk about in the 80s, but I mean, it's not just focused on Dark Knight and Frank Miller, right? So I like that they went to Hawk and Dove and had these other stories in that, because there's so much more to comics in the 80s or comics in 86 than just those really impactful stories. Not taking anything away from them, they deserve to be talked about, and they deserve to be lauded, but so much else gets lost in the conversation when those two are just when those major stories are all people talk about.
Well, and what kind of surprised me, and this is my fault for not being like an absolute scholar of DC in the 80s, but one of the best-selling books post-Crisis was what? Green Arrow, Longbow Hunters, which they talked about how important that book was and how much of a big impact that was. And I was like, I don't like it. Doesn't even cross my mind.
Watchmen was Dark Knight was so new and prestige format was so new that Longbow Hunters was really the first one that took advantage of the terrain that Dark Knight presented. Used another character that has an incredibly robust history, and it worked for a second time. But it wasn't anything that was callous. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to have the Wonder Woman prestige. It didn't operate in that fashion. It was very organic, and led to an ongoing series, which was one of DC's big sellers for a time as well.
So.
And then, of course, the British invasion and all of that with the those British writers that were coming in.
Yeah. So what, Caleb?
Confession time. I have never read Longbow Hunters.
Neither have I.
I've never read the.
Good. It's
good. No, it's on my. I want to read. I want to read Longbow Hunters, and I want to read the rest of. Was it the Denny O'Neil run on? Who had that long run on Green Arrow? I think it was Green Arrow, Green Lantern. Was that O'Neil or was that Cowan?
What? Who? It was O'Neil and Adams.
Yeah. Okay. So it was okay.
So you never read Hard Traveling Heroes?
No, I have not. I've got to read that. So I've not read hardly any Green Arrow stuff outside of when it's connected with
and not the Kevin Smith, which is much better than people
haven't read it.
I think it's wonderful.
Yeah,
I think
it's just a character I've never really dabbled with, and so
the first year or so of Mike Grell on Green Arrow as writer after Longbow Hunters is very good, including a remarkably touching depiction of a gay couple well before you normally saw that in comics. Also within Longbow Hunters, there's one moment reading it as a kid that just shocked me that they went there.
Yeah.
And I hope you two have that same impact. I hope that, because it's not a moment in comics that's really talked about these days. So I would, and just the way that it is presented is jarring. That I would really be interested in your reactions to that. So at some point, I hope you guys read Longbow Hunters.
Yeah. It's on my list. I want to get read.
An app if you wanted to do a trial for 2 weeks and get it in.
I've got the DC Infinite still. So
well, it's rare to walk in a comic shop and not see the omnibus sitting on a shelf somewhere. So it's something I need to grab at some point and just read.
Also DC in the 80s was a wonderful time where they were just throwing anything against the wall, seeing if it stuck. There's some terrible DC books from the 80s.
I think I saw a couple.
Terrible Thriller. I can't make heads or tails about what that story is about. But
what was that spin-off of Sword of Sorcery that I saw?
Conqueror of the Barren Earth.
Yeah.
Conqueror of the Barren Earth. Yeah.
Well, it shouldn't be too hard to conquer. It's barren.
Yeah.
It's like one dude like planting a flag's mine.
I think I won. Hello.
But
Anyone?
they just had a policy of the time of that Jeanette Kahn was remarkably open to new ideas, and not everything succeeded. But I'd rather have 10 books like Thriller or Sonic Disruptors that I mentioned than 15 safe ones.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and then also, Camelot 3000 and like being able to not just showcase like a very weird out of left field kind of book, but also a new paper and a new coloring process and all these sort of wacky things that they were.
I wish they went into the Mando process, because with the Mando books, if you got a book that was
the Mando process is going to get put to the side. Oh, he's back.
He's back. Okay, Mando process.
We just didn't hear.
So the Mando process. What I was saying was, if you got a book that was early when the printers were running, beautiful colors. If you got one that was later, there's so much bleed that it's you would rather have newsprint. Yeah.
And unsurprised, because they're testing it. They're experimenting with this stuff that eventually became, industry standard. By the late 80s, early 90s. But that was a lot of fun. But also we did attend the Seduction of the Innocents at 70 panel, which I was really excited to, because there was a bunch of people who either grew up under the Comics Code Authority or worked under the Comics Code Authority in the early days and even before. So like you had Louise Simonson talking about it. You had Al Milgrom talking about it.
Who was a riot.
He was a riot. Oh, he was hilarious.
He was a riot.
I think Carl Kessel might have also been in that too.
Bob Greenberg.
No, Bob Greenberg. Bob Greenberg was in there as well. And it was great hearing from them talk about these stories. And also Dan Parent was also on the panel too, talking about Archie.
I stand corrected. It was Dan Parent. And that was also because the Seduction of the Innocent legacy naturally led to the Comics Code Authority, and Archie was the last company that was utilizing the Comics Code. So that's where, and some of the interesting stories about Archie's books getting rejected by the authority. Mostly on the reprint thing.
Yeah.
Mostly on the reprint basis, just because it's changing perspective. Yeah. It was...
Dan's response to that, too, is like sometimes they would go to put out some reprints of something from the 60s or 70s, and it would get rejected. And they were like, oh, we can't read the story? Oh, well, we've got hundreds of other ones. We'll just
put another 5-pager in there. And then if they got stuff rejected, often they would just resubmit it, and it would get approved with no changes.
Yeah. Yeah,
so I'm curious.
Louise Simonson was great about talking about that. She's like, that happened to her so many times where she was like, it was a joke. Everybody in the industry knew that it was a joke, but you had to kind of do it.
I'm curious. Did they talk about Wortham at all at that point?
Oh yeah, they did.
They bring him up. I mean, what was the? So I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, he's not going to be met with kind regards in that setting. But what was the vibe like when they spoke about Wortham?
Well, the thing is, I think my perspective on Wortham changed due to Stan Lee, of all people, in that he felt that as misguided as the crusade was, that in his dealings with Wortham, he felt that he was somebody who genuinely cared about the welfare of children, genuinely cared. Well, that this, because this really was his only major work. In this area, and everything else was basically clinical.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't have the same opinion about Frederick Wortham that I think a lot of other comics fans do. I think in the realm of comics and publishing in the First Amendment, he's a bastard of the highest order, right? I'm not going to pretend like he's not. Him and Tip can go to hell together in that regard, right? But when you look into his life, which I've had to do because you read books that mention him in other contexts, and they talk about the work he did in civil rights work, and they talk about the work that Fred Winworth did, where he did clinical psychology and he treated Black patients in a world that was segregated, right? He did a lot of really good work in that regard. He was not an evil man in that sense, and I think a lot of people miss that about him, and they don't realize.
I think they equate him as comics Joe McCarthy, and it really is a lousy equivalent.
He was so much. He was. There was a whole other part of him that did really good work. And again, not defending anything that he did, right? Not defending seduction of the innocent. I think that was incredibly misguided. I do think that he believed in what he was doing, right? He was a true believer. And again, when it comes to my understanding of the First Amendment and caring about that stuff, fuck him forever in that arena. But there are so many people who would just like condemn him to the bowels of hell completely. And there's another side of him that I don't think gets enough discussion time in those arenas, such as comics and stuff.
And I think Wortham just kind of was a product, or his legacy is a product of what was going on politically anyway. So, I mean, if he had written this book and they weren't having hearings, specifically looking at the media as a way to scapegoat somebody and bring fault to some, aspect of TV, film, radio, comics, whatever, that's turning all the children of America into delinquents, or, rotting their brains and turning them all into communists or whatever. If he had published this 5 years before, I don't think anybody would have given a shit.
Yeah. And you also have to
5 years later, I don't think
tempo. You have to look at the temper of the country at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the films of the 50s.
Yeah.
The majority of them are sickly sweet. You basically skip to the 60s for any true kind of innovation, and any true kind of subversion. 50s is a kind of bland time in terms of cinema, at least in the States. Outside of the States, it's a very different story. And I think that was just I wouldn't have been surprised if there would have been a Comics Code Authority without Seduction and Wortham.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been surprised at all if something like that happened. And there's, you also have to think at the same time that, there were books that weren't Comics Code approved. Gold Key and Dell never submitted anything to the Comics Code Authority.
And then you had other publishers that went the magazine route.
Yeah. And look
at just changed the format of the books, but
still going, from the mid 60s onward.
Yeah.
So I think there were avenues for it, so I don't see that, like, the damnation of the First Amendment. I don't feel that.
Yeah. And for me, I think we are desensitized now with everything that we see. And like you said, I mean, anybody, like, I've seen Lars von Trier, so there's not a lot that's going to shock and awe me, but for the vast populace in the late 50s, early 60s, I think they would look at the stuff that William Gaines was putting out and be like, wow, like, it was a shock to the system. Right. And they were having this big conversation about what was pornography and what was smut and filth and stuff like that. And again, I'm not defending that work at all, right? I'm not defending Wortham and the lead up to the Comics Code, but I'm curious when people have that conversation, because that is all they know him for. And
it's very uninformed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other side is somebody who cared deeply about young Black kids, at a time when no one else did. So,
what other panels were we at? There was one that I went to that Steve didn't.
Yep. Because I went to Bad Idea instead. Did I talk to you about Bad Idea? One of the things that they...
Yeah, you can stop right now. The one that I went to, and this is a show I have not watched at all, Xavier Riddle and the Secret Museum, which is based on the I Am books by Brad Meltzer and Chris Aliopoulos. So it basically teaches history lessons. It's a 15-minute show that airs on PBS. It's entering its second season. And, they basically profile heroes. And one of the episodes that's coming up in October, which I got a preview screening, is of Siegel and Schuster. And it was great seeing some of that material in animated form, some of the stories about how Superman was created and their difficulties in getting him published. Xavier Riddle and his friends are basically curators. I don't know curators, but they're involved in this secret museum where kids can watch. And it was really interesting, having them talk about how the show was formatted. And it seems like the kind of show I would have loved to have had as a 6-year-old. Absolutely loved to have had as a 6-year-old. They also gave some information about some upcoming books in the I Am series, including the first We Are series book, and that is the Beatles. So
cool.
I'm just looking here about what else we went to.
Well, we did see on Sunday. We got to enjoy the company of John Wesley Shipp, who was a blast to listen to, because he, when he talks about his life, he performs, as an actor is want to do. But it was so much fun hearing his stories about filming The Flash, about his life, outside of The Flash, before that, with all of the with all the soap operas. And then he talked a lot about his stage career, where
I was going to say we have a connection.
Bill got involved, because I had seen him in Dancing at Lunasa, which is this wonderful play written by an Irish playwright, Brian Friel. And I saw it in the West End. I saw every Broadway replacement cast. He by far was the best Jerry, the best actor cast in that part. And there were 3 that played it over the run, apart from understudies. And then in the late 1990s, I was able to direct a production of it. And Steve saw some pictures of the set. And we just had a great conversation, because he also very recently performed in a stage reading of Donuts.
Superior Donuts.
I couldn't think of the first word.
Yeah.
Superior Donuts, which is a play written by Tracy Letts, who's a great playwright. Osage County, if you're yeah. And since it was a stage reading, I asked him what were some of the complications of getting stuff across, because stage readings are weird. They're not quite theater, because you have book in hand or book on stand. It's not quite radio, because different muscles are flexing, and he seemed to really appreciate that, and I got a few handshakes, and
he still is a handsome gentleman.
Yes, he's very, because how old is he? He's a little over 60 now, right? Yeah. So yeah.
Is he still with his husband? I'm not sure.
I believe so.
Oh. That's a shame. Kidding. That's awesome.
So, this is, I find really enjoyable, because we're talking about an event, Baltimore Comic Con, but we've talked about the 1950s, the 1980s, a particularly abrasive and weird publisher, so it's cool that we've touched on all these things from the panels that we went to. I do have a resolution though next year. I have to lose weight. I have to lose weight, not just because of the problems with the feet, but I saw some pictures. Oh boy. Oh boy. And I'm resolved that this is the last year that I think Steve and I don't want to say that we're guilty of something, but we did not promote the podcast well enough while we were there. And I think we have to, get on top of booking guests again and talking up the show among creators. And it's not that difficult to do. I think some of this is tied with my issues of body image right now. So, and I just felt like I look so old in some of those pictures. So,
Well, what I would like to do once I get once I'm on a more reliable schedule, if that's possible, right, where we know where I'm going to be at 2 or 3 conventions, and obviously this is not something we can guarantee, right? I would like to block in some panels on things that we care about, like do queer comic panels, do niche queer comic panels and stuff like that. Which I know, Bill, you pitched a few and stuff, and some different ones.
And
Like,
I've done before for other,
and Brian Pittard as well has
Brian
has
as
done
well.
a couple.
Yeah.
which it's harder to do at those bigger shows, but some of my favorite memories from that, from Southern Fried Geekery that I used to do, being in Arkansas, I would get asked to moderate panels for some really amazing people and get to interview them on the podcast. I mean, Freddie Williams, Chaikin, just some really cool folks.
Oh, Chaikin, we went to Chaikin too.
I know you did. And
Yeah.
I could listen to him for hours, and literally did. I spent a lot of time listening to Chaikin podcast over the last week. So.
Yeah, I'm looking here, and it doesn't look like there was a queer panel. There's the representation.
There was a representation panel, but it was more sort of general representation. So queer, minority voices, that kind of thing. So Afua Richardson was there, and like a couple of people. But unfortunately it was one of those where it's like is at times against other panels that we were at as well.
So I think that's something that we should work on next year, because it's no secret how much the rejection with New York Comic Con hurt me. And some of it feels like you built something up for over a dozen years. It's been valuable enough to get some prestige among the con circuit, and then it's disregarded. It's just it was a blow to me, I'll be honest. Really hurt me. But you can either wallow in it or take it from there. I mean, it's one rejection out of how many acceptances.
Seriously.
It's a rejection from a quite frankly, and it's not I'm not just pretending like everything's okay, but it's a rejection from a convention that continues to eschew comics and continues to move farther and farther away from like the actual comics ephemera of the culture, and it's more concerned with this culture that actually surrounds conventions. I think we've reached that weird phase now, right? There is Comic-Con culture, right? That has nothing to do with comics, and really it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with
look at New York Comic Con's panels. Look at their prestige panels. There's nothing that's comic based. Nothing, unless you consider there's like an anime in there on main stage, a manga book, and that's about it. Whereas year after
it's a new culture now.
Really robust DC or Marvel panels, at least one each time. All right. Things will be better next.
We got plenty of books to talk about too, and it's funny enough, but I think a lot of the books that we're going to talk about are related in some way to the things that we talked about around the convention. Or the things that that Caleb wasn't able to experience, but we experienced
this time around, right? We don't have any big two this time. Yeah,
no, I don't think so.
With me in the mix, that's something. So
yeah. Our friend Vince would say this is conceptual continuity. It makes me happy.
Conceptual.
All right. Who wants to go first? Do you want to do the normal Steve, Caleb, Bill, or?
Yeah, let's go with Steve, Caleb, Bill.
Yeah, we'll go with Steve. Talk about a book.
So I'm going to start this off by talking. What? Huh?
I said set this rocket up.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start this off by actually talking about two different books, but together because they're kind of all part of the same initiative. And that is the new EC line that's coming out of Oni Press. And so what they're doing is they're taking the EC imprint and then creating a series of different titles that represent the different, types of books that EC put out in the 50s pre-code. So you have your horror titles, you have your suspense thriller titles, you have your science fiction titles and your crime titles. So all of those have been coming out over the past couple of months. And so the two that, I'm just going to talk about together are Epitaphs of the Abyss and Cruel Universe, which are the two that have already come out. We've got Epitaphs from the Abyss, which is the terror, the real horror title. And beautifully, representative covers, and you can see the same branding. There's the same style that they're putting out these books with to bring back good old memories of the EC, Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, etc.
Who did that cover?
That is a good question. Let me see.
It looks like Kudaransky.
It is not. That one is.
If it's not him, it's going to be who did the Black Barn book with Jeff Lemire.
This one is Andrea Sorrentino.
Yeah, Sorrentino. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
This
one's Sorrentino, and this one is Liber Mejo.
Yeah. I love Liber Mejo. That's not Sorrentino's best work. It looks like Kudaransky, but I'm going to go back to drinking my whiskey.
Well, it's representative of the book. This does not necessarily appear in the title, this image right here, but this image does on Bermejo's cover, which I believe is the A variant, whereas this one is the B variant. But this story actually does appear in Epitaphs from the Abyss, and it's kind of one of those weird twisty ones where you have this couple being hunted by these, hideously deformed mutants. They've just set fire to a church, killing, a dozen of them. Really great, except for the fact that the twist is the hideous mutant freaks are vaxxers, and the couple who is not are anti-vaxxers, who want free will and don't want to be forced to take the vaccine for whatever disease. To which the vaxxers said, "Yeah, we also had free will. We chose to take the vaccine and become hideous mutant freaks rather than die." And of course, there's that big twist, but there's also a second small twist that makes it really funny. But anyway, these stories are great. They're usually no more than 6-7 pages, just a variety of different subjects. You've got some like this story right here where a family is being held at gunpoint by a whole bunch of SWAT team whatever members, and the father is forced to kill one of his family, including himself, or else the gunman will kill all of them. And
looks a bit like Bill Hester.
Yeah. And every story there's a huge great. You've got Jorge Fornes, Peter Krause, Phil Hester, and writers like Brian Azzarello, Stephanie Phillips.
Oh, is that Phil Hester?
Condon. This one is this one is Hester. Yeah. But it's just just really great little bits that are thrown in there. And the first issue is available. I think the second issue is coming out. For the sci-fi one, there's actually I believe a couple issues that are on the shelf now. Of Cruel Universe. And so this would be issue number 1, came out in August, and had some really cool twisty sci-fi titles. This one I thought was very, very clever. I can't give away the twist, but it's kind of like a planet where a bunch of aliens or a bunch of people are captured and forced to fight in gladiator combat to the death. You have the narrator talking about everything that they're experiencing, all the emotions, all the the fear, the confidence, the bloodlust, all of that. And meanwhile, we're following this human character who you also believe is the narrator. No, is not the narrator.
Is it the dinosaur?
It is the dinosaur. Yes. It is a female dinosaur who's been narrating the whole story, and it's great. And and that actually makes it sadder at the end of that tale. So definitely, I recommend reading that.
Steve, can you go back one panel?
Oh, sure.
Hey, Bill, you know how we like to say that Caleb doesn't have a type?
Yeah.
You see that bottom panel?
That's the type?
Caleb has a type. And he wants a lawyer.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I also find the dinosaur very sexy. No, I'm just kidding. No, I agree. I agree. He's fine. You could eat a couple more cheeseburgers.
Buff dudes in collars who want lawyers is my type.
There you go.
Okay.
He's actually he's talking about his type.
Like,
I want a lawyer.
That actually came up in discussion after a panel with Steger. about one of the moderators. Like, did you have an issue with one of the moderators? He said, not an issue. Just Bill has a type.
Bill has a type. And Bill's type kept making appearances throughout the con floor. So we were like, hey, look, Bill.
Yeah, we kept running into him.
And this story, by the way, is by Matt Kint. And of course, the artist is Kano, who has done some really great stuff too. I love this little story. In the second issue, you have this tale, which kind of reminds me a little bit of the Creep Show Stephen King segment, where he finds a meteor and proceeds to become a giant green plant monster. And this one is about a injured former rodeo champion who now has a really shitty life, and he experiences an alien ship crashing near his home and finds a ray gun, which he then proceeds to use to be a big shot by getting rid of his problems by disintegrating them. And of course, that raises the attention of the Men in Black. But there's, just a whole bunch of these really great, fun, stories in here of all different categories. Some of them are as short as 2 pages. Some of them are as long as about 8 pages, but they're great. And they're a lot of fun. If you used to enjoy either in trade or, in back issues, or maybe never have experienced a EC comic before, the format is it's anthology format. There's usually a host who, shows up at the beginning of the book and kind of has a couple, crazy puns and talks about death. But the stories are great, and they're a great showcase for writers and artists who just want to do something short and fun. But I totally recommend it. So far, the first 2 books that have been released are Epitaphs from the Abyss and Cruel Universe. There are also and I was going to look at the other one, but they are coming out with the suspense one, I believe, next month. Shiver Suspense Stories. No, it's coming in December, and then there's going to be a fantasy title called Cruel Kingdom that's coming in January. So keep an eye out for it. By Oni Press, the EC Entertaining Comic imprint that they're putting out monthly titles now.
Can I ask one question before we move over to my book? And this might be this might be a Caleb is an ignorant millennial question, but most of the EC books that I've looked at were all black and white stuff.
They were published in color.
Oh, they were published in color. A lot of them, yeah. I'd say mostly in color, right?
Some of the reprints are black and white. Even I think the first reprints were in black and white, going back to the first library editions, but they were all originally published in color. Okay. And the archive editions are all in color.
See, I told you that was going to be a Caleb is an ignorant millennial question. And you educated me, so I appreciate that.
Well, and Caleb, also, as another sort of like incentive here, I think in issue number 2, you've got a Riley Rossimo
nice
story.
Yeah.
You've got stuff from David Lapham. Actually did the ray gun. He did the cowboy with the ray gun. That was written by Christopher Cantwell, and Stephanie Phillips also did.
Oh, nice.
In that. So I think you might find some.
Yeah, I mean,
the fact that it's anthology.
All of those names are hitters, man. Those are big names.
All right, Caleb, over to you.
So I will see your EC Comics throwback, and I will continue to carry our conversation regarding the history of comics and things that are rooted in the quote unquote origin story of comics. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit, and Steve, I know you've read this, Bill, I think you read part of it, about Howard Chaykin's Hey Kids comics. I was really excited to read this. I'd read the first couple issues, and sorry about the fuzzy picture I sent you.
Oh yeah, it's a little fuzzy. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, that's probably the one I sent you. It's my fault. So I was really excited to read this. Right, I've been in a weird place with comics right now. Not falling out of love with them. Still love to read them. Like, it's just I need to change the way I read, and the things that I'm interested in have morphed. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? I now care more about the people who make the things that I read more so than the stories that are in them. I'm more interested in the craft of it, just how they design the pages, kind of the narrative quality of the images. I'm going to piss a lot of people off when I, say some things, but like I read a lot of modern comics, especially some of the stuff that's the mainstream, the big things right now. Honestly, stuff from people I love legitimately, like Daniel Warren Johnson doing work on Transformers right now. And I look at it and I'm just like, no, those are really cool pictures, but they're not, I mean, there's not really a narrative quality to the things. And so I'm just like, nah, well, I don't know what's going on with me. Let me change the scope of the way I read and what I'm reading. And so I've been wanting to read Howard Chaykin's Hey Kids comics because it mixes two things I love, right? Introspection and history with the comics medium. I mean, I love reading about the history. So what Hey Kids is, it's in a way Howard Chaykin's fictionalized retelling of the real stories of comics history, right? Some of these are not, some of these are stories that are taken and molded from spoken history that he knew, when he cut his teeth working for folks like Gil Kane, just talking to all of these old heads. So he had a foot in both worlds. And just over the years, he would hear these stories, right? And he had reached out to some creators, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, people of that, and said, just tell me your stories, right? You don't have to say names, but tell me your stories. I want to take this. And of course, some people did divulge names. And that birthed Hey Kids Comics, which follows the history of comics starting in like the 1940s all the way up through the 2000s, right? And it's modern times, but it jumps around. It's not a linear story. So in this first issue, right, the first trade, it opens up and it's 1967, and it's where the first issue starts is New York City at a theater, and the theater is displaying Powerhouse, which is Powerhouse is what they're calling Superman in this story. And it's got this guy who's a big shot, right? A former publisher. And it's not in this picture by any means, but it's got this guy who's a publisher at the time. And he's the guy who made the ideas, or not made the ideas. He took the risk in the ideas. Mayor Hershinshin is his name. And he's walking into the theater as they debut Powerhouse, and this other fellow walks up to him, and his name's Irwin. And they just kind of nod, and he says, "Irwin, how's things going?" He's like, "Good, just good running into you. Hey, sorry to hear about Ira. Yeah, nope, he's gone. Yeah, it sucks. A lot of stuff to go around." And so they split up, and Irwin goes walking down the street, and then he's asked to leave because he's not supposed to be there. And this other guy goes in the theater and he's lauded copiously and people treat him great, right? Irwin is very probably Siegel, right? The Ira, the guy they're talking about, is Schuster. That you can look online and find out who Hershinshan is, but he's one of the big DC editors at the time who took the risk and published the thing, but really didn't do any work on the stuff and was rewarded richly for it and made a lot of money and did not share that with the people who actually did the work. And that just kind of sets the tone for the way the story goes. And it bounces around from the 40s to the 50s to the 60s, and all the way through. I'm on the third volume now. But it's interesting. And the names are changed to protect the bastards and the angels of everybody who did the things that they did. And also because these are not one-for-one stories, right? These are not a fictional retelling. It's not a biography. And so some of these are analogs, and they mix up stuff because it's not meant to be real life, but it's going to give you the basics and the tone of what these stories, of who these people were, who actually crafted the medium, who created it, and who have carried it forward through 100 years, and I find that incredibly interesting. And it's a story that's being told by a person that I have a lot of respect for, somebody that I disagree with on some things he says, but I have a lot of respect for him. And he, I love that he calls himself the Archbishop of Fun. It's Howard Chaykin, right? He knew these people, or at least was one degree of separation from a lot of them. And so he's giving you at least a secondhand or sometimes firsthand accounting of what happened here from somebody who understands who these people were, not as we put them, right? As we think of these people as somebody I read about, characters in their own right, right? Like these were human beings, and some of them did bad things, and some of them were very much mistreated. And he takes that and he really unpacks that. And he does it in a really cool way, right? He takes all of this and he follows the life and career of three kind of creators throughout all three volumes so far. And these creators are I should say the talent, right? Like he doesn't refer to them as creators, they are talent. And these folks are Ted Whitman, who is in the first one, he's smart enough to keep his head down in a world that publishes color but sees talent in black and white. Ted is a black man in this story. Bonita Hindle, who came in anticipating challenges for a woman in a man's world only to discover that comics are really run by little boys. And then Ray Clark, who is morally compromised, artistically inconsistent, inevitably confused about why his self-regard isn't shared by his colleagues and friends. And it follows these folks all the way from their inception. Some of these people, right, that you're seeing here, these kids who fall in love with comics, who are fans, who then become talent in the industry, right? Where as opposed to some of the other folks, as they grow into who they are, as opposed to the people who started the medium, who were never fans because there was nothing to be a fan of. They were just talent. Curiously, two of the three are what they're anagrams, right? We don't really know who they are. But Ray Clark is very clearly Gil Kane, period. And I think even Chaykin has said, like, no, he's the one of the few characters that you can absolutely who he is, right? He is Gil Kane. We know that, like I mentioned earlier, we know that Erwin Glasser in the story was Siegel, Irish, Schubert, and so it goes on from there. There is a character or Schuster, sorry. There's a character that's very clearly Stan Lee. There's a character that's very clearly Jack Kirby, and there's a character that's very clearly Ditko. Other than that, everybody's a toss-up. And interestingly enough, I love that Bill selected the shirt that he is wearing today, because he is wearing and Bill, I don't know if I'm looking at something else right now, so I don't know if you can see the shirt, but Ted Williams is arguably the closest person that matches who he is Matt Baker, right? And that is who created the character who is on Bill's shirt. And
he didn't create the character. He worked on the character, but he didn't create. I think he had a very big part in the most prominent version of the character, but he did not create the character back in 1940. Yeah,
he worked on Phantom Lady a lot. If you Google Matt Baker, he comes up. Phantom Lady is one of the first things that you'll see. And hilarious enough, Bill and I did not talk about this
at all.
Had no clue he's wearing this shirt. It is completely just the universe.
This was a Baltimore Comic Con get. So
yeah.
And thank you, Rob Stager, for pointing that booth out, which we had passed a couple of times and then decided to.
100%. I don't think we would have gone back and bought shirts if Rob hadn't given them the biggest the biggest advertisement.
Yeah. I love it, and I love that you wore that. Now, who I don't know, obviously, like I said, Ray Clark is Gil Kane. I am not 100% certain who Bonita Hindle is supposed to be. We talked about this earlier. It could be Ramona Fradon. It also could be meant to have part and parcel of Flo Steinberg, although I don't think, and historians can correct me on this, I don't think Flo drew anything.
No.
And one of Bonita, the character's thing, is she is an artist, she is in the bullpen, and she doesn't draw like a girl, right? That's what they say about her.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
That description to me matches Marie Severin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when did Marie Severin really get her start in comics? I
believe the mid 1950s.
Okay.
I believe
the
mid 1950s.
She would have worked up to that point, and so that would kind of fit the timeline. And look, we all know the story, right? Like we all know that Stan Lee worked for Artie Goodman, who was his uncle, and they did what they did. They brought up the company. They took in people. We know that Marvel or Timely and DC traded talent. We know that these people were not paid well. We know that it was treated like a business, and it was not well respected in a lot of regard. And then we also know that some folks made a lot of money, and the people who should have made a lot of money did not make a lot of money for the most part. There are analogs to, by the way, Bob Kane and Bill Finger in this. And Chaykin does not pull any punches. He is also not unfair. in this retelling of the story. And I say that based on, you know, what I know, right, which is third-hand information and reading books about this and stuff like that. But he's not cruel, and I will say that. A lot of people, they think of Chaykin, and when they hear him talk about the history of the work, they think he's cynical, and they you know, he's snarky, and he's, you know, just everything is, he's going to shit on somebody's doorstep, right? He's not cruel in this. He tells the story and treats it with respect, and really lays out who these people were, warts and all. And then he shows the attitude that they had towards new creators coming in, like the second wave, like the Roy Thomas era, second wave of fans who, quite frankly, the people who made the medium had utter disdain for for the most part. At least that's what it seems like. A lot of them did. They did not care about these folks. Chaykin will talk about his history with Gil Kane, where Gil Kane will be like, yeah, no, dude, you can't draw. You're terrible. Like, but all of these people, including Wallace Wood, gave him a start. And while they were borderline abusive to some of these new creators coming in, they also set the tone for them to do the work and to change the medium. And a lot of that is built in here. It's a really interesting story. The dynamics are cool. The time jumps are cool. It is neat seeing the way that Chaykin works now, because if you go back and you look at American Flag, like, this does not look like the same artwork. I mean, you can tell it's still Chaykin, right? But his process is different. The way that he produces comics is different. He uses digital medium now in a way that is a little, it is not as refined as what a lot of digital artists are now, but he doesn't want it to be, right? And that's not what it's meant to be. So it's interesting from all standpoints to see both the growth and the evolution of who Howard Chaykin is, and how he views at least this history from the narrative perspective, and then just getting a little bit of, you know, a fictionalized narrative that is based in reality of who these folks were. You know, it's an interesting dive into history.
Yeah, so talking about his illustration, his style, there is something about a Howard Chaykin jawline.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but there's just like, but yeah, I mean, it's very. I love this. I read all 3 volumes in floppies when it was coming out, surprisingly, and it just is such an intriguing story, or collection of stories, really, where you're following all these people from like the beginning to ostensibly the end.
Yeah.
You really get to see the cynicism at work, because they don't really change all that much. I mean, you know, the industry kind of changes around them, but also some things kind of stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
The one big cynical thing is, of course, the industry still screws creators for the most part. And then there's also that bitterness where it's like, well, it screws all creators except for these, that somehow, you know, these hacks, you know, in this, you know, created this new publishing company. They got all the money, they got all the fame. You know, what the hell was I doing all this time? You know, just hammering away for the past 40 years in a bullpen. And, you know, I think, you know, it is a really interesting, emotional story, as much as it is like, oh, who is that? You know, what kind of stuff was happening at this time period that you can kind of connect the dots and say, oh, this was, you know, what was happening at Marvel. This is what was happening at DC or Charlton or whatever it was. You know, it's very emotionally, I would say, deep. You know, what is coming out of these characters, or these, you know, archetypes of creators that just really,
well, hey,
it really gets me. It really does get me.
Chaykin writes good people, right? Chaykin writes good humans, right? Because they're flawed. One of the things, when I mentioned that he's fair, right, and I don't think it is fair to say that this book is just like talking about the worst parts of the industry, and it's set out to make certain people look bad and certain people look good, whereas it's just kind of it's translating in his mind what happened. One of the things that stands out, there's a line in this book that I think really sets the tone and really says it best. This was an industry that is propped up on people who did not know or care about the value of their worth, or the worth of their work, the value of their work, until it was too late. And other people did, and those people profited. And that's where I say he's fair in that assessment. the folks who should have gotten the money in this did not believe that their work has value. They had no faith in the value of their work. It was disposable, and so they just threw it away and they just kept grinding, right? Whereas other people did realize the value of that work, and they took advantage of that situation to make a lot of money. But he also puts the fault on a lot of these creators for not understanding the value of their labor.
Yeah.
And I think that's,
and they talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think a lot of times when fandom talks about this, it's very one-sided. Fuck Stan Lee, he screwed over everybody, which is also not the full scope of the story, right? You know, what happened to Bill Finger was abhorrent, and there's no changing that. But it also doesn't mean that Bill Finger, you know, does not, you know, that he knew, he did not know the value of what he did, and he did not claim the value of what he did, and he may not have been in the position to do that. Right. So there's some unfairness to that too. So it's interesting coming from Chaykin, because I think Chaykin has a really good way of cutting to the quick.
Yeah.
With these things.
Okay. I'm going to backtrack a tiny bit on something here. Steve, one of the books that you had of the two that you just discussed was in a pack of 20 comics.
Oh, yeah.
That you purchased at the show. We ended up doing unpacking videos, both Steve and myself. Steve having, I think at that point, he had 3 and I had 1. And Caleb, our intention was to get a pack for you so that at some point on the show that you could open up and see what 20 books you had from that, because we did well. We did well in terms of the books, in terms of value and also of quality. So my book is from one of those packs, but I will let you know, Caleb, that we didn't let that $5 that went unspent go to waste. And at some point, you will be receiving as our gift to you from Baltimore Comic Con the first Submariner annual from 1970. So that's headed your way at some point. So. You probably would have liked that more.
On that note, I now want to know who Bill Everett is supposed to be in this story, because there's got to be somebody with some traces of Bill Everett. Sorry, I'm like, but thank you guys.
Yeah.
We
didn't want, you won't go empty-handed if you're not at a con. You're there with us in spirit, and
I have your stories, and really that's
later in acquisitions.
So. But I will take Namor.
Okay, so one of the books that I had was the first issue of Morningstar from Mad Cave. There are 5 issues up to this point. I don't know if that completes the run or if there's going to be a 6th issue. That Steve, do you have any idea how long this was solicited for?
I'm not sure. I think it is, at least the first volume is the 5 issues. Let me see.
I'm back.
Yep.
Okay. So you have a cover there. You see there's what is once you open the book, you realize is a family. And the story takes place in 1956. At least that's when it opens. And in 1956, there is a very strange forest fire that is happening in Kootenai National Forest in Montana. And a group of firefighters will end up in a horrifying kind of stasis. So right off the bat, where you think the first 2 or 3 pages leads you into what might be a mystery or an action story, very quickly becomes a sci-fi period piece. It's a very intense opening, but it introduces you to the father that they're following, and that follows through the story. And he leaves behind a wife and 2 kids. Now, they then move the story to a year later. What they believe to be the remains, the ashes of this firefighter, are going to be spread in this area in Kootenai National Forest. And when they do go there, my apologies. The father's name is Nathan. The mother names is named Jolene, and there's a son and a daughter. The son is effectively nonverbal and is always playing with things and imagining that he's in some sort of science fiction story. Took the death of the husband very deeply. The sister, who is a bit older, seems to be more grounded, and their big worry is that they'd be moving back to the East Coast and not staying in Montana. And the mother assures them that that's not the case. So they go up to the area, which is not very accessible since this event had happened, and they go there with the intention of spreading the ashes and just getting in touch with nature, and also, as I said, saying goodbye to the husband in some kind of formalized way. And as they're there, there's a series of strange occurrences that happen, including the return, possibly, of the father. So I'm really nutshelling it very, very quickly. It moves at a very brisk pace. You can see here there's some introductory pages there that deal with the fire. Steve, if you can keep going on some of the images there that I provided. And you can also see that the firefighters are an interracial branch, and I'm interested to see, given that this was in 1956, if that factors in later to the story with some of the complexities. I don't give you the big giveaway, but if you can just go to the next page. Oh no, we're back to that page. I guess did I give you the same page twice?
I think that's the last slide. Yeah.
That's it. Okay, I possibly gave you the whole slide. But it's really cool in that you don't exactly know where this is going to go. Is this a ghost story? Is this a science fiction story? Is it a combination of the two? All you know that the woods are creepy and that this is a family-based story, I think, adds a particular nuance to it. I'm very interested to see where this goes. In terms of the creative team, let me check my notes here because I did take that down. The writer for this is where did that go? Well, the art is by Marco Finnegan. Writers are Tim Daniel and David Andre. And I also have to give exceptional salutes to the colors of Jason Wordy, and especially the lettering of Justin Birch. Those are some of the more interesting elements of the story, of the reading experience. And you can see here, just from the promotion here, no electricity, no telephones, no transportation, no escape. So, whether that's a situation that leads you to A Quiet Place 1956 in Montana or something very different, I don't know, because the place that it leaves you hanging at the end of the first issue can provide a myriad of different roads that this can travel. And I love first issues that are like that. That's to me is a perfect first issue.
Yeah, very, very open-ended. Leaves you. It actually makes you want to go to the second issue.
Yeah, and also
Absolutely.
In terms of the art, I enjoyed that. This is somewhat like our former co-host Matt Broussard's art. We also mentioned Phil Hester. That's also a very good equivalent. And just to show you some of the greens. I mean, look at that green. That isn't a simple color. That isn't a button. There's creativity behind that. So so really enjoyed that. And Steve, I understand that you also read this.
I did, and I have a different cover of yours. This one is actually by Skylar Partridge, but not only is the front different, but so is the back.
Nice.
So I have the same taglines.
Oh, that's cool.
But a different image that's more about the full moon in the forest. With that green, actually, interestingly enough. The one thing that really gets me with this one is, especially with the sun, being that his imagination is running wild, we see his imagination at work, just incidentally. So as they're driving, there's a giant dinosaur. As they're, walking around outside, there's there's a moonscape, or, he picks up a flashlight and it turns into a ray gun, because that's what he's
and all
imagining.
of a sudden he's Buck Rogers.
Yeah, but is what we're seeing then real? Of course, we kind of have this idea, there's something very supernatural or extraterrestrial happening here, but how does the sun interact with this? And is the artist also kind of affecting some of our perceptions as readers? What is the supernatural? Are we there yet, or is this something else that's going on that we have to kind of pick apart? It's cool. I enjoy it. Again, Mad Cave, and it is only a 5-issue series.
Only 5 issue.
This one, so it should be 5 and done. But depending on the on the feedback and the reception of it, there might be room for something else. I haven't read through the whole thing yet, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
The interior pages that you were showing looks a little bit like Josh Hickson from who did the plot and some other stuff from Vault Comics. So if you're listening to this, it's and can't see those images, if you've read that book too, it gives you some of that that horror vibe too from
and also sometimes when you do have art that leans into the cartoonish aspect, it makes the storyline more scary,
right?
I mean, the equivalent that I always provide is the most terrifying version of Jonah Hex ever is Darwin Cook's.
Yeah,
it just you're not expecting that particular vibe from that particular artist, and in some ways it just goes off into a realm that's of itself and does something better in a sense than something more traditional would. So
it's the same concept of why those why kids are terrifying, right? Like the twins in The Shining, right? They're just little girls just sitting at the end of the hallway, right? But in the context of knowing it's a horror story, that's terrifying, right? It's innocence in the dark place. It's
Okay. We may have to speed through some of these books a little bit, but let's go through our second. So, Steve, take it away.
So, my second book, this one just came out this past week. It is called Duck and Cover. It is by Raphael Albuquerque on art and Scott Snyder on writing duties. Basically, if you are a fan of American Vampire, it's a team up that you may have come to enjoy previously. This is not like that. This is a very different story that takes place in the mid 50s, and it's specifically referring to the Duck and Cover. The Duck and Cover. Yeah, everything's in the 50s. Everything's in the 50s. EC Comics. I'm bringing it. Here's an EC Comics thing. Whatever. Unfortunately, I'm having issues with the imagery for this one. It doesn't want to load for me. That's fine. It's a great little story. It introduces us to a cast of teenage characters. One who's like a big movie buff, and through some unfortunate events is racially motivated. Unfortunately, is trying to get the hell out of this town once he's got enough money. And there's several other characters. There's some of his good friends. There's the town sort of bully, racist bully, whose girlfriend is the daughter of the principal. And they're kind of a motley crew that is thrown together in detention after getting into a massive fight at the drive-in movie theater where the main character works. And while they're there in detention, the sirens go off. And, again, if you grew up in the 50s, I'm sure those air raid sirens were pretty commonplace. Those air raid drills happened all the time. When I would visit my grandparents in Philadelphia as a kid, it would ring in the hour every 11 o'clock every day. You would have like the sirens go off. And that's just something that you just kind of expected. But in this instance, the sirens don't stop because the bombs are coming and the Soviets are invading. The kids wake up to find their school devastated, but they're alive because they listened to the turtle in that little famous cartoon, and they ducked and covered under their desks, and somehow that saved them from the nuclear blasts. However, this is clearly, a very interesting sci-fi story, and there's something else that the magical deaths have done other than protect them from nuclear fallout, and that's give some of them superpowers. The super Soviet army that's invading is a little bit more advanced than the Soviets of our time in the 50s. They have giant, steel creatures that, round up the surviving children. And again, they were all young people because they learned how to duck and cover, while adults apparently didn't have access to, school desks to get under. But it's an interesting premise. It's done wacky. The art is fantastic. And it really is kind of a very much an EC Comics sci-fi, story writ large, where there's just weirdness and craziness. You don't know what to expect, but there's a lot of twists. There's a lot of gruesomeness, and promises to be a pretty fun ride. So Duck and Cover, out of Dark Horse, Scott Snyder, Raphael Albuquerque, and then Marcio Maiolo and Bernardo Bryce on colors and letters. So recommended.
All right, cool.
Very cool.
All right, Caleb, what's your second?
So I'm gonna break the mold and talk about a book that wasn't in the 1950s. So I've got a newer book. It is Minor Arcana by Jeff Lemire. My standard disclaimer when it comes to a Jeff Lemire book is I can't be objective when it comes to Jeff Lemire. I just think he's peerless. I love the guy. I love his work. This is a story that has a lot of Lemireisms, right? The book is about, at least seemingly, it focuses on this character of Teresa. She is a young woman, probably in her mid-30s, maybe 40s. We're not really quite sure, or at least so far, I'm not quite sure. And she grew up in this little town called Limberlost, very small town. Jeff Lemire, a lot of his stories are Canadian-esque, so it feels like a very northern era town. It looks like a lot of places I've seen in Michigan, or that kind of area. And the book opens up with her coming home, right? Can you come home again? What does it mean to come home? And she is taking a bus there, so she gets off the bus and she goes, and she just utter disdain. You see it right from the what shot Steve is showing you. She gets off the bus and it's just, she doesn't want to be there. It's contempt for this small town. She's not happy to be there. We don't know why. The first place she goes, she walks up in the town and she just looks at this psychic shop of all things. And now I grew up in a small town and we did not have a local psychic shop, but apparently this one does. And so, she just kind of stops there and she's just like, not yet. So she goes to a diner. When she goes to the diner, she sits down just to, kind of collect herself. And of course, small town, somebody recognizes her. Hey, aren't you Teresa? I went to high school with you. And she's like, yeah, sure, if you say so. She does remember the person, but she just doesn't want to talk to him. And the way that Jeff pushes the story along, that's the moment where she's like, oh, are you back here because of your mom? Sorry to hear about your mom. And this just, it sets Teresa off. Does everybody know everybody's business around here? I got away from this shit. And so she just kind of storms out. Yeah, is rude to the waitress. Really doesn't have time for her, doesn't want to have time for her. On her way out, she catches herself because she's apparently not a bad person. She's just like, hey, I do remember you from high school. You were great. Like, we should catch up. We'll get together soon. I'm just going through a lot. So she marches herself over, right? And she goes into the psychic shop, which is, of course, ran by her mother. Her mother is the local neighborhood psychic. Her mom's battling cancer, and it's not going great. And so she's moved back to this area to kind of take care of her mom, but it's not completely altruistic, right? We find out that things in the big city were not going well. Her mom, through the conversation, tells us, the reader, that, look, you broke up with, quote unquote, that girl. And so we catch a lot of stuff just with that one sentence. about how her mom feels about the relationship and about her daughter and moving away and stuff. She's lost her job. She doesn't have that much going for her. So this is both let me move home to take care of mom, and also my life kind of fell apart, unrelated to my mom's issue. And so I'm going to move back. What she doesn't expect is that her mom expects her to take over the family business. And, regardless of what you think about psychics and psychic readings, whether you think that there is something to them or whether it's a scam and people just know what they're doing, she was raised in this and she knows what's going on. She knows the tricks of the trade. She knows how to read people. And she's not okay with it at first, right? But then late one night, a knock comes on the door, and it's a local who just needs to have her cards read. She needs to know if her late husband's around. And, of course, this sets Teresa off. It's 2 a.m. The fuck are you talking to me for? Go away. But she ends up reading her cards and falls into kind of a dream state wherein she's surrounded by just isolation, right? When I say this book has a lot of Lemireisms, the book is inherently about isolation, right? We see that it's about family, which Lemire leans into a lot. Interesting enough, not about fatherhood, which he's touched on several in the last several books, but it is about loneliness and almost the normalization of loneliness that a lot of people feel, right? There are queer undertones to this book. There's familial relationships. It answers the question of what does it mean to be an adult who has to deal with potential loss, but also deal with the fact that you are unsettled, unseated, and a little bit aimless in where you're at. It's the human condition, and Jeff Lemire writes the human condition better than anybody I think who is working in comics today. At least that's my estimation. And so again, I'm not objective. It's great. I love seeing him draw again. It's Lemire art. It's what you want to expect. I love the watercolors. All in all, I'm happy with this book. Did it blow my socks off? No. But I want to see where it goes. And I think that there's going to be a lot to this. If you look at the back cover, or at least the last page of the book, it lets you know that this is going to be a 4-part series, so to speak. I don't know how many volumes or how many issues are going to be in each volume, but it's going to be 4 volumes. And they are all going to kind of take place together and end up in this 4 hardcover set that focuses on different elements of the tarot, which I'm interested in tarot. I'm interested in this whole world and, interested to see what Jeff Lemire brings to it. And at the end of the day, this book has something to say. And it goes back to what I was talking to about earlier, right? Like my interests have changed. The way I read books have changed. I have very little time and patience for books that don't have anything to say. I don't read books for sheer enjoyment anymore. I'm not interested in popcorn and candy. And so I think this book is psychological. I think this book has has verisimilitude and introspection to it, and it wants to have a conversation with me as the reader. And that's the kind of book I want to read right now. And so that's what I'm looking for. And so I'm ready to see where this goes. Can't wait to get more of it.
So I did want to mention this. I kind of threw out there in one of the conversations that we had before the show. Frog Catchers, this gentleman right down here talked about this earlier this year. Or was it maybe last year?
It was last year.
Last year when it came out, it's a hardcover that Lemire wrote and drew about death. Puts very simply the process of dying. Interestingly enough, most of it takes place in the Edgewater Hotel. In Minor Arcana,
I didn't catch
our
this.
heroine finds herself at the Edgewater Hotel multiple times.
Yep.
So
Shared universe.
A connection. So until she shows up with Black Hammer, I think maybe that might happen too. But Caleb, I love Jeff Lemire a lot. Maybe not as much as you do, but a lot. And I have a feeling that he is building his shared universe in the way that Stephen King has built his, where not necessarily everything's happening in the same, reality, where there's superheroes here, or where there's, aliens across time in another place. But I think we're seeing some connections here that are coming up a little bit more. And I'm wondering if because again, this takes place in Ontario, some small town in Ontario, probably might be around oh gosh, I forgot the name of the county. Everything takes place in the same county whenever he writes local.
Essex.
Essex County. Essex County. Yeah.
So, I mean, is Essex County Jeff Lemire's Derry? Maybe, or his southern Maine, his part of southern Ontario. But when I saw that, I immediately grabbed my copy of Frog Catchers and I flipped back and I'm like, it is the same place. It's the exact same place.
I love that you caught that. And now I want to go read May's book to see what connections are in there.
Yep, May's. That's the other May's book. I also need to look back through. I haven't had a chance to do that. But then also Fireflies, which again does take place in Essex County, and does have some magic associated with that. So maybe there might be some connection to that. And that was just finished about last month, I believe. So,
well, and not only that, but there is also the byline of death that runs in this book. In the last page, she draws the death card. Like you said, the other books really have to do with death. Jeff is focusing on that. Death is a big thing with tarot, but it doesn't necessarily mean death, right? The death card doesn't mean like impending doom. So there's a lot to this book, and I love what he's doing with it to kind of unpack where the emotions that go into it. And so it makes me happy.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just taking away from this something I never thought about, which was the notion, as you said, Caleb, of isolation runs through a lot of his books. Yep. I'm even thinking of a work like Trillium, which is a love story that is, that is basically the propulsion is because of isolation, and even in a love story, that's a central element. So I never thought of it in those terms. So that's pretty cool to
Underwater Welder. Underwater Welder is a lot about isolation. He has this introspection while he's literally underwater. Black Hammer, a lot of these characters are isolated together, but they are still isolated. So there's something very, very thematic about that in his work.
Yeah. Okay, and he was also announced as the writer of JSA, which I'm very excited about for something completely on the other end of things. But his superhero work is also pretty awesome. So
it's impeccable.
Yeah, happy. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So for my last book, I'm sticking with Mad Cave, and like Caleb's last book, I'm actually going to be set in the current day. And this is a current day book if you ever had one in your hands. This is A Phone Call Away, which is a new graphic novel, which is written by Rich Dueck, who, if you might remember a couple months ago, I championed his Breath of Shadows series from IDW, which was sort of like The Doors in a horror story. He was a panelist on the Mad Cave, and I do have my copy autographed. We unfortunately were not able to go to the signing because of when that actually fell through. So from the cover, you may be able to, surmise what this is about a little bit. And if you thought it's about the role of celebrity in social media, you're absolutely correct. In this story, 14 years ago, a couple, Andrew and Emma Walker, had their young daughter Mandy disappear at the age of 6 and then later turned up tragically murdered. And since then, the media coverage made the Walkers very, very famous. And you cut forward to 6 years later, they've adopted a young girl named Megan, and they have a reality TV show called Second Chances. And they put their money to what appears to be very good use with a foundation that helps other parents and other family members try to locate their missing children. But on the morning of her 6th birthday, Megan goes missing. The open window in the room suggests that this was an abduction. And then you kind of see the facade of Andrew and Emma fall a little bit in their reactions to that. One of the initial suspects very quickly is a former journalist named Nina Hendrick, and she is approached by the original detective on the case, LAPD detective Raul Martinez, and they have a very frank conversation when this does happen, when Nina is brought in. in regards to how both of their lives have kind of fallen apart after their involvement in Mandy's disappearance. Now, very soon, the Walkers get a phone call that Megan's kidnapper provides proof that Megan is still alive, and that sets a series of events where they go searching for the daughter, and all the parties converge in a sense, both in terms of perspective and literally in geography. And this isn't a book with one or two twists. This is a book with like 7 twists. And I want to keep that quiet because I want people to enjoy this. But I found it very difficult to qualify this as a horror story. I think if there is a genre as fictional true crime, this would be firmly planted within this. And also just the nature of how celebrity factors in to our society at this present time. It's an excellent commentary on some of the darker aspects of that. Our friend, the letterist Louis Cazzoni, was the letterer on this, and very cool, very difficult to show, but he actually has his name credited on the spine, which is really cool, which you don't really see that often for letterers.
See if we can get close.
So, yeah.
There we go. There's Lucas.
There's Lucas.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed this book. I put it down, and I was, that wasn't really what I was expecting, because I think you went in with the horror, spooky Halloween expectation, and it turned so many different corners that I can't really think of a comic book work that you really can compare this to. I'm certain there might be, but for me, it's a very unique type of story, and that's A Phone Call Away by Rich Doak. The artist is Russell Olson, and yet another artist that is in the Matt Broussard, Phil Lester sort of camp that we're talking about. And Steve, you also bought it, and I understand you read it as well.
Oh yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, I agree. It's not horror, but it definitely does fit in with true crime. I mean, the way that, and true crime itself can be horrific, especially for the people who are experiencing it. And the story that's told here is one of that could be a pretty terrifying situation, but it's been turned around. The couple now has made that part of their social cachet. I mean, they have a reality show. They have fans that follow them with their new daughter, and it's that sort of bizarre turn of fame that comes out of tragedy that also kind of feels icky. When if you're a true crime fan, it's also hard to kind of justify, like, these are real people and terrible things have happened to them. Do we really want to know everything about their lives as if they were reality stars?
It forces you to think of what if we had TikTok and other social media outlets when the John Benet Ramsey case occurred? It'd be a totally different perspective on that crime. Totally different. Yeah.
But it's really, I do really enjoy the twists. I like the characters.
I love how complex the characters were.
Yeah.
I
mean, who you support,
nothing
you may
close to a stereotype in here. Nothing close. Yeah.
Very fun read.
All right. Well, we got through our books. We got through our Baltimore Comic Con wrap up, which had its tentacles and various books and things that we talked about during our roundtable segment. So we're going to move on, and we're headed towards the end. And before we get to the final segment, we have a segment that we call Geek Gets. Now, with 2 of us had just gone to a con, we're at an advantage, but
I will give the floor to you guys. I really don't have anything right now.
Okay, Steve, you want to show off something you got at the con?
Yeah, so I went to the Bad Idea panel and I got, never mind.
That was very good. That was very good.
So one of the good things about Baltimore Comic Con is that they create every year what they call the yearbook, and in the yearbook they have a themed character or something, and they have a ton of artists and guests provide absolutely gorgeous representations of this character. This year, of course, is the Tick. This is I believe it was the 25th. Was it 25th anniversary? 40th anniversary? It was an anniversary year. But this year they decided to highlight the Tick, and there's some really fun artwork here from various guests. We've got Don Simpson of Megaton Man fame. Howard Chaykin actually has an entry in this as well. But I just thought it was really cool. Just a really great book. And a lot of people, what they do is they either get signatures from all the guests, or they also have a checklist that you can do that as well. I did not do that this year.
If I could just show off, the first version that I had was Grendel from 2014.
Gorgeous.
And
wonder if
Mr. Wagner also kind of personalized it.
Did he also provide sort of like a personal picture?
No, but he provided a boner.
Well, there you go.
Not
as he does.
Yeah. So.
As one does.
Yeah.
But that was what I just love that at the con. It's definitely worth however much you pay for it every year. It's because obviously it's not cheap, but it is worth every penny. And then something I didn't get at the con, but I got after, was Charles Burns' latest release, Final Cut. And this was also happened to be signed, so I very excited to get that book plate signed in there. But it is just a gorgeous, gorgeous Charles Burns book. If you've ever read Black Hole, if you've read anything that he's done, you're in for a treat. And you're also in for a whole hell of a lot of weirdness because it's Charles Burns and he's got to be weird. Definitely a gorgeous get. And I totally recommend if you can find it. It should be available most comic stores everywhere. So.
Okay. Now, in terms of the acquisitions that I had, you already see me wearing one, the Phantom Lady shirt. Next time around, Steve will be wearing the shirt he got, according to him. And I'm just going to pick up a few things here. Sometimes the coolest things you get are not comic related at a comic convention. So from 1968, I got the official Beatles Yellow Submarine magazine.
Oh, nice.
I'm very excited about this. I knew about a good number of Beatles magazines from 64 to really the late 70s that were published in the States. I was not aware of this. I really was not aware of this. Yellow Submarine was heavily merchandised in the States. And I'm very glad that I have that, especially because I didn't know about it. I came back into comics in 1985, and one of the best tie-ins to comics in 1985 was the Kenner Superpowers toy line, and some of the ancillary products that they created in support of the toy line were pretty interesting. And I've got one of them in its original form, the deluxe talking storybook, Superpowers, The Battle for Apocalypse on cassette. So I'm very excited to have that. I love
get out your boombox and get ready to listen for adventure.
It's very hard for me to go to a Comic-Con and not get an action figure. I got a few, but the best one is the Toy Biz-ish from Hasbro Hercules figure. He's basically the patron saint of the comic book bears, and happy to have it. And
now I couldn't remember, did they actually have the painted on chest hair, or is that they left him smooth?
No, he ain't smooth.
He's spackled.
Yeah, he ain't smooth. And then lastly, I am not one for slabbed books, but there was a vendor that had them at ridiculously low prices. I mean, ridiculously low. I mean, like the price of what it would cost, a fraction of the price of what it would cost to slab a book. So in my travels there, I picked up Uncanny X-Men number 282, a 9.0, first appearance of Bishop.
Yeah.
So it's a nice, cool thing, souvenir. I went back for more and it didn't work out, and Steve probably agrees with me that was probably best. Because one for rabbit holes, which is
I mean, it could have been a disaster if there were more that you wanted.
Hey, last minute, I do have a Geek Get. I've got one. I got this really cool W that the boys just got over the Giants.
Oh, cool.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Hey,
well, cool.
Do have one note here from Daniel Williamson, who's watching. That Tick book looks great. Is it available outside the con?
Okay, here's the complication there, sir. When we've gone to Baltimore Comic Con in the past, they would have the previous versions on sale for fire sale prices, usually about $10. I would check Baltimore Comic Con's website if they do have something, but I think you generally can only get those at the convention. Maybe eBay is the secondary market. I don't know, but Steve and I were both really surprised to not see the previous versions that went unsold for sale. That was very because
we're just surprised. So either they sold out of the previous ones, which is kind of a worry if it is a limited edition, so they technically only have it for the con, but I'm sure you might be able to get something.
In terms of the retail stores that Baltimore Comic Con are most closely aligned with, Cards, Comics, and Collectibles in Maryland, I might want to check their website too. Maybe they would have something. Yep. All right, we're going to head to our final segment. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears Up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week. In the bear community, if you find a fellow attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar to that. I was a little bit too excited.
I've got a boner. So.
I'm titillated. There we go.
I'll tell you, I'm good at woofing.
You gave me a Matt Wagner.
So in this segment, the Woofs of the Week, we spotlight something which may be comic book or comic book related, or maybe a film or a TV program or a child initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
My Woof of the Week is English Teacher. It is a TV show available on FX, Hulu, Disney Plus, whatever. You can see it on that. It's got a great cast. It is chaotic dialogue. It's really fun. But it basically is about a English teacher who is openly gay in Austin, teaching at a high school, and the people that he works with and his friends, and just the wacky adventures that they get up to. The cast is great. You got Brian Jordan Alvarez, who is the creator as well as one of the writers and directors. Stephanie Koenig, who's a frequent collaborator of his and also a writer on the show. Sean Patton, who is right there, is also very good eye candy as well. And Enrico Colantoni, who plays the constantly put upon principal. It is hilarious. There's a lot of great material here. It is just a laugh riot. Some great cameos as well. Trixie Mattel makes an appearance in the second episode as a messy drag queen. So very true to life. But it's great. I love it. I look forward to it every week. Jason and I just watch it as soon as it's available. It is definitely a blast.
Cool. All right, over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your Woof of the Week?
Well, speaking of messy drag queens, Catherine Hahn is in a new series. So my Woof of the Week is going to be Agatha all along, right? Like I love this. It is it's spooky season, right? It's done well. I loved, adored, thought that the WandaVision show was spectacular. This follows suit in a really cool way. It touches base with that, but it really focuses on Catherine Hahn as Agnes, right? And shenanigans ensue when she is put upon and starts to realize that that maybe she is trapped in a reality that's not real, right? We remember the end of WandaVision, right? She has to gather a coven and go down the witch's road, and this really picks up and sets off when a young boy, a teen, if you will, an unnamed individual who is played by the adorable Joe Locke, shows up from Heartstoppers fame. Also who did a stint as Sweeney Todd on Broadway, I believe, or at least the maybe it was not Broadway.
He was Toby and Sweeney Todd.
It was Toby. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So he did a stint on that. So doing really cool things. The show is fantastic. It really is. Short episodes. It's got a mix of, the really cool things that make WandaVision cool, but also just kind of like schlocky horror from like the 90s, like appropriate for kids, scary movies. I mean, there's some shtick that you would expect to see on movies like Hocus Pocus, right? Like it gives you that. It's got that very 90s feel of things, but also bounces back and forth through elements of WandaVision, right? I love it. The neat thing, if you're watching this, we're all geared up and we're excited about Joe Locke because Joe Locke is definitely playing Wiccan, right? But they don't tell you who he's playing. He's just called the Teen. And anytime he starts to say who he is, his mouth shuts and things go across it that just has an M. And so we don't know who he is. And so that's part of the mystery. Is he really, it set the internet ablaze as trying to figure out who he is. I love it. He's trying to pull off an American accent. I'm not sure how well it works. It's there, right? But every once in a while he has these little British inflections. It's really adorable. I just want to put him in my pocket. Like I just want to carry him around with me. He's a cutie pie. So it's fun. But yeah, no, if you want witchy stuff, if you're into Halloween, you're looking for spoopy season shows, check this out, right? Also, if you love Agatha and Marvel and Wiccan and that world.
Yeah, I did watch the first 2 episodes with my friend Seth, and I think I could watch Patti LuPone yelling at other people all day long.
Patti LuPone is the gold. I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah.
Patti LuPone is one of my favorite parts of this show, right? She is just hilarious.
And I don't want to reveal too much of the conceit of the first episode of what it's kind of based on, but they do that perfectly. Let that be a surprise to people. I thought it was just a very well cast Marvel show, and not every Marvel show can claim that.
No.
So
Aubrey Plaza does a really good job in this as well.
And the woman from that 70s show, I adore her in this.
Can we talk about that for just one brief millisecond, right?
Yeah.
Roger and I were talking about this last night. She looks both completely different and simultaneously exactly the same as she did in that same. It's weird, right? Yep. Like it is both. It is weird. Like she looks, it's the same, but nothing like it. I don't know how she's aging the way she is, but it's odd. I love it.
Yeah. Mm. Well, have you watched this week's episode?
I have.
No. When did we have the chance?
I have.
When
do you guys have this time? It came out today, didn't it? Or
yesterday, Wednesday.
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
I don't know.
And the cool thing is these are not, they're not 30-minute episodes, but they're also not 1-hour episodes, right? So they're like mid 40s. You can fit one in pretty tight, and I'm good at squeezing big things in tight spaces. So
okay, all right. So all right, Steve, if you could just throw a graphic up for my Woof of the Week. This is what I listened to. At least I completed it on my trip back and forth to Baltimore, and that was season 2 of Rachel Maddow's podcast Ultra. The first season dealt with a now forgotten sedition trial where members of the U.S. Senate were effectively complicit with Nazis before and during World War II. That is a forgotten part of U.S. history. Second season shows that the tentacles of that move into the 1950s and into someone else we talked about today earlier in the show, and that's the great senator from Wisconsin. I use great as bullshit, and that's Joe McCarthy. It's a riveting story. It's scary about how the more things change, the more they stay the same. Do your part and please vote in this election, because it's not hyperbole to say democracy's on the line in the States. It's not. And using the past as a teachable moment, this show will provide you some additional resolve in making sure that happens. So 8 episodes, one bonus that's available on the MSNBC Plus. But you get the podcast within 8 episodes, and it's a very rewarding listen. And also, you don't have to have been listening to season 1 to get the full story from this, which is a big plus. So if you want to just start with this season, you can. Yeah. And that's my Wolf of the Week.
Did you catch our interview with Lev?
No, because that was on Friday, and that was the travel day down to Baltimore.
Yeah, it's worth going back and revisiting.
But I have MSNBC, even with cutting the cable, and I'll tell you guys how I got it. Steve might want to set it. Yeah, no
magic.
Yeah, and it's not
magic.
Not even illegal. It's cool.
I like the mid clap that it froze on.
He's so excited that the clap just froze his internet.
Yeah, I know. I'm very back here. Okay, we are the Comic Book Bears. You can find us through Apple Podcasts and many of the other podcasting platforms like Spotify and YouTube as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. We are Comic Book Bears on most of the other social media outlets. If you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you have joined us through Facebook Live, thank you. If you are joining us a little bit later on video through YouTube, thank you. Please like and subscribe and leave a good message there. And we would always appreciate that. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
If you're listening to the audio version, you're going to hear a woof and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.